we have to understand how statues work and how context affects what they mean. And for the first question we have to actually show in this debate is, what do the statues represent? What is the context in which they were erected? How are they taught? How are they approached today? Because saying generic things like they represent Confederacy is not enough. We have to understand that different statues represent different things and different contexts. It is true that statues sometimes glorify, but they can also represent sorrow. They can also represent regret. We're going to analyze, therefore, firstly, how does that happen? We're secondly going to talk about pluralization. Most things in the room explicitly agree this is the most important question, but lastly I'll discuss why we think it is alone the most important question in the debate, because other parts of the debate have not been solely around that. Let's dive, all the rebuttal is obviously going to be integrated. Let's dive right in. So first, what does these statues represent? Because Orwell already started the case when I tell you, look, some of these soldiers fought to protect themselves, some of them didn't support slavery. It also tells something a lot more specific. We don't know what are necessarily the facts, right? Maybe Alon and Joel Oliver are right. We have analysis to show why we think they are wrong in this scenario. It all tells you two important things in this issue. Firstly, although it is a factual claim, we have analysis to back it up. They were created to respect the South and the grievances of the past, right? If you want to use them as an oppressive tool, using an anonymous soldier seems like an odd choice. But giving a symbol that anybody can recognize with and associate with the losses they had after the Reconstruction, after the war is ended, seems a lot better choice to having those soldiers specifically. Therefore, those statues were actually erected in the place of, in order to create unification itself. Moreover, it tells you, giving that goal in mind, in a lot of the scenarios, there were actually statues of Northern soldiers as well next to them. It's not the same statue, but just like OG's, or maybe it was Ozo's example, about the black person in the court statue, those statues were erected in place and in thought, advanced thought about having Northern soldiers in them, because they don't represent the war itself. They represent the grievances of the South and the places they have after the unification, and how that war specifically was a bad thing, but you still have a place for your own grievances. A lot of people disagree, right? Well, let's look. John Oliver told me it's all about the Jim Crow laws in the 1910s. We say that is very unlikely. Why is that? A couple of reasons. A, this is quite a terrible symbol of oppression, right? You have strong symbols that people associate with slavery, right? People who actually owned slaves, generals of the war. Those were not erected in masses at that point, for reasons specifically, and that's because they are terrible at oppressing people. Most people, specifically at that time, probably didn't associate them that strongly with slavery. Sure, some association occurred, but if you would like to oppress people, if the symbol they glorify, probably an anonymous nobody in the South that doesn't even necessarily support slavery or anything like that is a terrible choice. So it is unlikely they were resurrected for that cause. Why does this matter in the debate? Because at the moment that you understand that these also are taught in schools in response to Alon's POIs as symbols of unification, but they have plates on them. States aren't viewed in a vacuum. You are taught about them in school. You view them in a context and there is a certain discussion around them. That the entire discussion is dictated towards those statues represent unification. The South and North coming together after the war and Reconstruction happening. Most of the cases from both government teams seem shady at best. A, we don't understand why any black person would be offended by these statues. They also read the same books and participate in the same discussion. Sure, they may link it to a certain extent to slavery, just like they might the South or the state of Tennessee. That does not mean they are that oppressed by the statue itself that it should be removed. But it is also crucial coming into the first question of polarization. Because we need to understand something clear, right? Again, open opposition, a brilliant case, right? Those people view them as attacks on themselves because they associate with their grandparents in some cases, and as an attack on their own sovereignty. It tells you something deeper than that. Three things we tell in extension. Firstly, the literal removal of a symbol of unification is obviously something that's going to cause more polarization. If you are now literally saying these are symbols that are not worthy, the symbols of after the war, when the South and North, like we see a certain trend right now, were disconnected, and we were able to unify them again, you take down that only symbol that exists in the South. Secondly, it all tells you that you use specifically these symbols are terrible, because now it tells you exactly how people are going to now be associated, are going to associate themselves with these symbols of aggression. That is an anonymous soldier, meaning you're going to get more aggression into the discourse and more aggression into people approaching that, as Ido already explains to you. But thirdly, we tell you, in a lot of the cases, the statue remaining is the northern soldier, right? It's a soldier from the north. It is the soldier that won in that war, and it is going to be a constant reminder now of that removal of how the north defeated the south, and how the soldiers do not have a place in current United States, and how the wishes do not have a place in the current United States. CG response is, but they don't want secession. That's right. But they are going to be now more inclined towards outright groups, as they don't exactly analyze you and get no response towards. Why is this crucial in this debate? A. Actually, yes, Odin.
Okay. So as long as Southern pride is tied up with the Confederacy in the South will rise again, healing cannot occur. Right now, under this president, we can puncture this narrative for the long term, and we should.
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Southern pride is tied up with the Confederacy, the South will rise again, we can puncture this narrative, we should puncture this narrative.
You won't puncture this narrative exactly as we analyze you do, right? And what we're telling you is what you're going to create is more association with the narrative of South versus North, more association with the narrative that maybe we should opt to groups who support that. They might be racist, sure, but they also support something that is deeply inclined to me. What we tell you is why this is crucial. A, so it is something that attacks something more essential to me. It's not only my grandpa, who maybe was a racist and maybe I want to discredit him. It is the feeling of being a Southerner, as it already tells you. It's something that everybody is going to be associating themselves with it. But secondly, it's not just any objection, right? It's not just a general backlash against the federal state. It is a specific symbol of the ability of the federal state to respect my wishes, my places in it, specifically in this time of somewhat divide. But then let's answer some of the cases we hear from both government teams. So, firstly, it needs to be cleared up. It needs to be stated clearly. We have no idea why those statues create more polarization according to OG's analysis. Besides saying, well, we think that in Austria and Germany that is what happened. Cool, they also have different languages and composers. We don't think that is specifically what this caused that. No analysis on why these statues specifically are the cause of it. And no more, when CG tell you, but I need to justify my grandparents when I see that statue. As it already tells them, A, unclear why the statue itself is the trigger for that, and B, why is that a bad thing? I can justify things in different ways. I am unlikely to try to justify to myself slavery as a legitimate thing because most people don't do it. I am more likely to justify it as maybe my grandparent didn't support that. Maybe he had lived. Maybe it was the times maybe it was the zeitgeist. Say those sort of narratives are unharmful even if people justify the grandparents that way. For all these reasons, please oppose.